Bitfarms, naming their chief mining officer, who is now their former chief mining officer, Ben Gagnon, as the new CEO. This is the official press announcement that I saw on Twitter. So it was a pleasant surprise when I saw this. When I woke up, I think this was like earlier in the week, right? So they did this like early in the week, and then they release it in the morning. And yeah, basically this is something that I've been talking about for a long time. How they had like a person who was extremely experienced, who's already been kind of the face of the company, giving interviews and stuff. So if you watch this show, for previous episodes, our show, you can see how we dissected some of the interviews that Ben Gagnon did, namely with McNally Money, where he spent hours talking about the operations of Bitfarms and why it's basically like justifying why it's a great company, blah blah blah, right? And it's like he's pretty convincing if I were to say so myself. So he seems pretty knowledgeable about the business operations. Obviously, I think he went to university in like Hong Kong, so he worked in Asia for a while, and then he came and took over the operations of Bitfarms. So I feel like he's kind of been the one that's been running the show already, somewhat. Of course, they did have another CEO before, but then now there's like a dispute with the former CEO who's like suing the company for breach of contract. So Bitfarms has a lot to kind of deal with right now, and I'm glad that they brought in someone who already has the experience, who already is kind of well known to the public, who has a good reputation to fill that CEO role. And I don't know, they kind of also misled us for like a long time, not like mislead in like a bad way, but like kind of threw some confusion into the mix where I think Bitfarms was saying how the management was saying how they're looking for a CEO externally, and they're like searching externally for like months and months. So we're like, oh, why are they searching externally when you have like a CEO potential candidate right there in Ben Gagnon, right? And I honestly, I would have been surprised if they just brought in someone completely new, which was what they were implying that they were going to do. But I'm glad that they didn't end up bringing in some like total unknown, or even worse, maybe potentially someone with baggage, right? And I think that they made the right decision in naming Ben Gagnon the CEO instead of bringing someone else in. But again, that's just my opinion. So this is kind of the news, and let me toss it to Tristan. What are your reactions to this piece of news, and what do you think of Ben? And yeah, what do you think of the future of Bitfarms in general?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm pretty pleased in general with the selection of Ben. My biggest criticism for Bitfarms was that they didn't have a CEO. And now that they've got one, and it's not someone who I was expecting to be bad as a CEO. So, like, for example, like with Ben, I feel like we kind of know more or less what we're getting, and we're getting someone who is reasonably competent, right? So I would say on that front, my confidence in the stock is a lot better than it was, because I mean, I know that he was previously in a leadership role, and he is now in just a more elevated leadership role. And either way, I'm sure he had some ability to move move stuff around at the company. The fact that he was selected as the CEO, I think, was a good decision, especially given it seems that they were unsuccessful in finding a alternative candidate that they were preferring. And I think that's fair enough, because when you've got a highly qualified candidate at home, I don't know why you would settle for anything less than that. And clearly, they seem to have been unsuccessful in finding someone superior to Ben. So, in that front, I think that it's pretty good in general. And I think that that does mean that they're probably going to be fairly similar to how they've been behaving the last few months, because Ben has basically been acting CEO, even if he hasn't actually been doing like the full title. or having the full title, but he's been the one showing up in press conferences and everything, and the face of the company already. So I think at this point, having him actually be the CEO is a pretty good situation, particularly over choosing someone random.
Yeah, you know, like that meme when like you're super young and then you go to the grocery store with your parents and then you want this like candy, whatever, like Kit Kats or like, you know, Oreos or whatever, right? And then your mom's like, we got Oreos at home. And it's like just like a knockoff brand, like Eat the Middle First. You know, that's a thing. Like the no name brand for
Mhm.
from Loblaws, they have like a brand of Oreos called Eat the Middle First because they can't call them Oreos because it's a trademark, right? So it's literally called Eat the Middle First, and it's like, like they have to spell it out for you, right? And it's like kind of a situation like that where, like, you know, a lot of people think it's a situation like that where it's like, you know, why look for a new CEO when you got a CEO at home? Except I would argue in this case it's not fully like that because it's not like, you know, a CEO of lesser quality that you have at home. It's like a rare scenario where your CEO at home is actually better than getting a CEO outside, if that makes sense, right? At least in my opinion. So I've been saying this for like a long time, actually, before this news came out that like, why don't they just make Ben the CEO? And there was like, you know, we were speculating on this show too. So I think I was saying that, you know, maybe for whatever reason, they just prefer an outside CEO and they want Ben to remain the chief mining officer. Because I don't know if they're gonna backfill the chief mining officer role now. Like now that Ben's been promoted, and like, do they even need one, right? Or can Ben still serve both roles, and they could just free up that role and just not have anyone in it anymore, right? So that's kind of like another question that I have that they didn't really answer. So I would love to see that question answered in an interview at some point in the future. But yeah, I was like saying that why don't they just put Ben in there? And we were speculating, oh, maybe like Ben didn't want to do it, or maybe like, you know, they must have at least considered the possibility or asked them at some point, right? But yeah, it appears that they did ask him, and he was willing to. So I think this was the best case scenario. The only complaint again that I have is that it probably shouldn't have taken this long, right? Because it's been like it's been like 2 months, right, or more than that, where they announced that the old CEO was fired and was leaving and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think it should have even taken this long, but I'm glad that it's finally here at least. And in terms of Bitfarms's performance in general, I think this is like a huge overhang that's been cleared now, right? The only other overhang on Bitfarms is like the Riot takeover offer, which, you know, I think with the poison pill and everything in place, I don't think Riot's going to be able to acquire Bitfarms, or at least not at the price of $2.30 that they proposed. So yeah, I don't see that really going anywhere. And maybe the only other thing is that if Riot fails their takeover bid, I suppose they could dump their shares of Bitfarms, right? If they really wanted to, like, you know, get back at them or whatever. And that's like almost 15% of the company that they own. What if they just dump all the shares onto the open market all at once, right? Which, you know, they could do, but in my opinion, it wouldn't be good for Riot either because it would be a bad look for their shareholders. And also because like they would not be able to get the best price for their shares if they just dumped everything all at once, right? Because they're going to crash the price, and then the final sales of their shares is going to sell for a lot lower than when they started selling. But I don't know. Like, what do you think, Tristan? Do you think like do you see any other like overhangs or potential dangers for Bitfarms, including but not limited to the Riot thing that I just talked about?
Yeah, I think the Riot thing could be a possibility for something that is a risky piece. Um, but I think it's a short term risk. Like it's if Riot dumps its shares, it's going to affect it in a short period, but then after that, it should recover, right? Um, so it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't be that surprised if Riot dumps it at some point. I think the only thing else you can argue is that maybe there's some additional risk with like respect to Paraguay if Paraguay for whatever reason decides to stop selling to the miners, or there's something that happens with their hydroelectricity or whatever, so that their costs increase. Maybe there's a drought, all of that stuff. Like there are some additional risks that I think Bitfarms may be in a position where they may be exposed to them, but I don't think it's necessarily any different from any other Bitcoin mining companies of risk. Like, look at Riot, for instance, where they can't turn on machines in Texas half the time because it's either too cold or too hot or whatever. So it's everyone's got risk on that front.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I think they did mention that part of the reason why they didn't get to the 12 exahash goal that they promised for end of June was because Paraguay experienced some severe weather as well, right? So it's not just, I guess, like North America that has the potential for severe weather, right? Like there could be severe weather anywhere. And also in terms of kind of the risk that you brought up with the government, the Paraguayan government, I like, if Milei hadn't won the election in Argentina, I actually would have been really worried about Argentina, because Argentina has had issues with their governments for like decades and decades, right? And it wouldn't be past the Argentinian, it wouldn't like be ill-fitting the MO of the Argentinian government at all if the Argentinian government was like, oh, we're gonna like ban Bitcoin, or we're gonna like kick out all the miners, or like seize all their assets and stuff like that, right? Because that kind of stuff has happened in the past. The good thing is Javier Milei, who's like a super libertarian, super like pro Bitcoin candidate, won the presidency, so he won the election. So I don't see them like kind of shutting down the miners and kicking everyone out under Milei's government. I don't think he'll allow that. So it's a good thing that like I think we're finally entering a bit of stability in the Argentinian government for once, and it's great that it just so happens that Bitfarms has operations in Argentina, because when they first set up the operations in Argentina, I don't think Milei was in charge back then, right? Like this was before the presidential election of Argentina, so like they had no way of knowing who was going to win, or like what the policies were going to be like after that. So I think they just kind of got lucky there.